Greetings, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for this time. I hope that you've been gritty. Hope that you're knocking out your summer assignments, maybe even getting some gardening in there. I'm a little guilty on that part. I wish I had more time. But as we get started, I want to make some announcements first for you guys. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on X Factor EDU Network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can be found on Spotify and on all the social media outlets. So speaking of the social media outlets, check out my Facebook at Miss India White. My LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube channels India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. Now, I also want to encourage you to please check out my website at www.india-white.com for books, blogs, and to schedule me for an upcoming speaking or coaching event. Speaking of events, I'm so excited about next week. I will be at Camp's conference in Texas with many of the rock stars across this nation. Can't wait to mingle and connect with you guys. If you are at camp, there are 3 sessions I want to promote. The first session is the Black Women in Math session that will be July 15th at 4 p.m. Again, July 15th at 4 p.m., where all of us will be there. There will also be my session the next day, July 16th at 4 p.m., where I'll be talking to you guys about, I think, either grit or equity, one of them. And then the next day, July 17th, I'll be speaking at 10 o'clock a.m. So please come and see me. Come and visit the Savas booth. We do have prizes to give away. We have some things in the booth and some things after my session and possibly even some door prizes. So with that said, I can't wait to see you guys. Thanks for those that are supporting us. Thank you, Savas, for your support. I also want to remind you guys of the NCSM conference that is going to be taking place in September. Also, the NCTM conference, I'll be there as well in September. ICTM in Iowa. Can't wait to be there. Love y'all, Iowa. I know I have to reach out. Thanks for your patience. I will be also at OCTM in October. So come check me out there. I'll be at the ATMNE conference in October. I'll also be doing some work with some of your districts. I know in California, Minnesota, and where some other whereabouts. So thank you to all of you for joining me in this effort to bridge the achievement gap and to keep us close together and to really build grit of students. Speaking of grit, I do want to remind you guys of the Grit Mini Workshop that you can find on the Grassroots Workshops website. I'm so happy to be on this platform with these amazing rock stars that have done workshops. Check them out. You have so many people on there. There's Graham Fletcher on there. There's so many other people on there. So check that out as well. Thank you, Robert Kaplinski, for that. And of course, a reminder of this podcast, if you are trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues or students aren't motivated to do the work, then this is a perfect podcast for you, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And so because we're focusing on bridging the achievement gap and we're focusing on what we need to do to reach students, I figured that I would bring a student on board to help us understand what we need to do best. So with that said, it's my high honor to introduce to you guys a wonderful student, somewhat like family. He's just a part of the tribe, and I've got great hope for him. I have my money on him for politics and for political science and to really change the world in a great way. So with that said, I want to bring onto the Grit and Equity Talks podcast, Alexander Rivera from Hillsborough, a student and equity advocate. How are you, Alexander?
I'm doing wonderful, India. Thank you again for having me on.
It's so good to have you. So tell people a little bit about yourself, because I know some people have not been graced with who you are and your awesomeness.
Well, my name is Alexander Rivera. I am a student here in Hillsborough County Public Schools, and I am also an education and equality advocate. My calling for activism began at the young age of 15 when a student came to me with a problem. And so one of the things that I was able to work with her on was creating a self-advocacy club for students that do not have a voice. And so what that means is that for students who they would come to us with issues, and then we would try to work with either administration or guidance to ensure them that they are not alone and that they have an advocate and a voice and a listening ear.
Wow, that's very powerful that you're doing that. And, we talk a lot about equitable practices. And, when I talk about equity, I don't want to just focus on the umbrella of race. I want to focus on reaching all students. I know that you are of the beautiful Hispanic background, but you also have so many other components to where you have been serviced as a student, even in Hillsborough County. And so, with that said, let's talk to you about what you think equity is. And I'll put the definition up. Equity is providing resources and accommodations as needed to promote access and attainment for all learners, right? What can your teachers do to best serve you with equitable practices in the classroom today?
Well, it's important to remember that students who, and as a matter of fact, the Florida legislature in 2022 passed a bill. It was eventually signed into law by Governor DeSantis. It's House Bill 19, which is an IEP bill that will allow their accommodations to follow them up until the age of 20, I believe 21 or 22. So it's a great resource for our students who are heading into college. If you're earning your AA, it is a great resource to attain to, because after all, education, as Susan Valdez once quoted, an education can never be erased. So me as an advocate, what I think equity means is that it's not just about what goes on in the classroom per se, but also what goes on the outside of the classroom as well. Because as you know, there is as a matter of fact, at my former high school, there has been several students that have accommodations. What does this mean necessarily? It means that they are in need of school supplies, or if they're in need of hygiene products. And when a student is in need of school supplies, then as a public relations officer, I will then send them over to a great resource here in Hillsborough County, the Hillsborough County Education Foundation, or the social worker or an administrator will reach out to the Education Foundation and get the student the support that he or she needs for success.
I think, I think it's great that you guys are doing your best to pay it forward to all students of all backgrounds, all, compartments. And I want to say this, equity, it should not just be a racial lens. And I think that's great that all students are being serviced through equitable practices. And so with that said, it makes me think of, when you're trying to close the achievement gap and really bridge the gap to service students, what are you looking for the most this school year when it comes down to being serviced by your teachers and your administrators?
Well, the important thing to remember is that the way that we can actually do that is by using GRIT, which means great resilience in time. And as I said before, in my opinion, GRIT means having a great deal amount of courage. Yes. Because here's the thing, we're trying to close the achievement gap. As a matter of fact, our school went from a C school to an A school, and that was something that we're very excited about, because we've been working very hard, and now that we have we're still searching for a principal, as our former principal has left to go work for the school district. But I believe that education doesn't just stop after you graduate high school, obviously. I mean, it can lead to either going to trade school, or it can lead to going to vocational school. I mean, my mom is 52 and she's trying to get back into college so she can, further her education a little bit more. And and as a matter of fact, my brother, who I'm very proud of, is now a fourth grade teacher here in Hillsborough County as well. And he even said that, we got to do what's right for our students. Meaning if that means that holding town halls with our school board members and telling them about the really deep root issues that are going on here in Hillsborough County, not just in Hillsborough County, but, statewide. My philosophy is, if I was a school board member and if I sat on the school board, I would pretty much keep my district informed practically every other week. Meaning that, I would keep them in the loop about what are some of the initiatives that we're working on. As you know, in 2021, when COVID, or long before COVID happened, in 2019, right before we went on lockdown, um, the legislature passed a really good initiative, the NRI, which stands for the New World Reading Initiative. What does that mean exactly? The New World Reading Initiative actually allows students K through 12 to sign out books, the textbooks that are property of the county that they can take with them. Um, they can take them home, study, and then they can bring them back. And so I think that's a really great resource. Another one is just overall, we have to do not just our part, and I'm working with the administration currently to adopt a community closet, which means like almost like a food pantry, supply closet, and clothes closet all in one. So if our students are in need of, let's say, because a lot of times our students are athletes and they have to have something on the field to keep them energetic. I mean, I know 3 athletes that are friends of mine that have all track, and they have actually collapsed on the field because of heat exhaustion. And they do have water, but it's not enough. So although they do have the water, they need something to keep them moving, not just on the field, but also in the classroom.
I love that because when you're having equitable practices like this, it doesn't choose sides. So equity doesn't choose sides. It's not like, okay, we'll service these kids, but not these kids. It services all students. Even students that don't have a diverse background are still, worthy of equitable accommodations and services. So I think this is great that you're talking about that. I kind of want to highlight a little bit more about grit. And I know that the state has talked about resilience standards now in the health education. And one of those skills and standards is that students must cultivate grit, which goes perfectly with my grit curriculum, grit workbook, things like that. But my question to you is, as a student, what are you looking for when you're trying to cultivate grit, and from your teachers? What do you need?
Well, I think it's important. I think one of the reasons that I myself as a student, the way that I receive grit is a lot of times teachers do not motivate their students in the way that they should. I mean, when I was a freshman in high school, one of the things that my 4th period English teacher would do was that she would have a quote of the day on the board. And then she would ask the student, okay, what does this quote relate to you? Or how does this quote mean to you?
Right.
And so I think it's important that by not just motivating our students, but giving them the strength that they need, maybe, because a lot of times teachers only see what goes on during school. They don't see what's going on outside of school.
Yeah.
They may see maybe a few, half the times, students may act unruly, and the teachers are like, why is this person acting like this? I mean, so it's, they have to have, the motivation for one. 2, if they are going through something, a teacher needs to be like, okay, is something going on? And, not a lot of, students will confide in teachers because they think that if I confide in my teacher, is this the last time I'm going to see my parent? Or, I don't want to, basically say that, a student is being abused, but I'm just saying that it would.
Yeah. Keep going.
Because it's important to remember that it's not just, the lack of motivation or the teachers, or, they don't, because a lot of times, this is what I found out because I've been in the county since I was 2.5 years old. So being in the school system almost 19 years, it's really important to remember that what goes on in the classroom is, not always the same as when a student gets on the bus or, takes the car ride home, because they're not there 24/7. If, like, for example, if a student is in need of, let's say, school supplies, they don't, because I remember from what my mom used to tell me of how she used to go to school, and she would go to school without school supplies because, her family just couldn't afford it, or, her mom wouldn't, help her. And so she would ask her teachers for help, and they would basically tell her, you need to talk to your parent. And at that time, the Education Foundation, I don't believe was around then because it was in early 80s. But it is a great resource for our teachers. And I'm not saying this as a way of being mean. I'm just saying this as this. Our students literally are the boots on the ground. They're going from class to class every day. And one of the things that I consider to be very important is that our children deserve equitable teachers who are not just trained in, situations such as, what goes on both beyond mental health. But I think that having a mental health training, with teachers before school, like let's say before the school year starts, and then
That's
towards, the middle of the year, and then towards the last week of school. That way it trains our teachers to remember that, this is what goes on. These are the signs you need to look out for. Surely they do great and all, but we can only do so much. And and as you know, Karen Perez, who's a board member, who's also a licensed clinical social worker, I remember calling her because I was going through a mental health crisis, and she practically helped me out in my hour of need. And if we can have an advocate, not just like Karen, but worldwide, it would make our nation a much better place.
wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm very happy she was able to be effective at serving you in that capacity. I want to get back to grit, and
Mhm.
I think sometimes people think grit is like just simply maybe telling kids to work harder, try harder, but we know it's more than that, right? It's more than that from your teachers. They have to actually make sure that not only that you understand the concept, but that you understand how to cultivate your grit, how to remain motivated throughout the year. One thing I want to say is I do want to give you a shout out on the show because last year, towards the end of the year, I saw your grit kick in. I saw that you started to believe in yourself more and you started to
I
meet
sure
those
did.
deadlines. You did, and you passed the
I did.
exams.
I passed my math benchmark, and I'll never
You
forget that day.
you did. So talk to
I,
us about how were you able to tap into your grit, and how can teachers, take some of these nuggets and assist students for the next year?
well, I think it's important to remember. My advice would be to go easy on a student. You don't know what they may or may not go through. I mean, obviously, a student can display one sign of behavior, and a teacher can display another. I mean, what's important to remember is I'll never forget the day that I passed my math benchmark. I remember speaking to the math coach, who's a great friend of mine who I've loved and adored for several years. As a matter of fact, since I've actually attended this school, I've been at the school now almost 3 years. And so when I came to the math coach, I'll never forget it. It was a Friday morning, so right before the weekend started, and coincidentally, it happened to be the week before spring break. And that Friday, we were basically on a limited schedule because we had a faculty student basketball game that day. I didn't go to it, of course, because I had to sign out early. But going back to what I was saying, I spoke to the math coach, and she was like, you passed your math benchmark on your last CLT. I thought, huh? I'm thinking, it's like, huh? This kid? Because I'm not a math nerd. I mean, I don't want to
You
say
are a
a
math
nerd
person.
specifically,
You still are. Listen, no,
because I
you
was I was completely dumbfounded and confused. And I remember telling my counselor, I remember going to her office after she told me, and she was like, you passed your math benchmark. I said, you don't say. It was like it was absolutely amazing, and to find out that
you've
I actually
always,
did it was
yeah,
even more motivating.
but you've always had the potential and you've always had the mindset, the skill set to do it. You just needed to be put in the right hands and you needed to be uh, recalibrated to know that you have what it takes within. And that's where grit came in. And the thing I love about you is I know that whatever you put your mind to, you are going to succeed. I am seriously excited to see what avenue you're going to take when you are an adult, you cross over into your career, whether that's politics, if you help out, um, Honorable Valdez, or if you help out others in the school board. I don't know what your path is going to be, but I think you have such a fire to you and such a grittiness to you that you're really going to make a powerful difference. And so, again, congratulations. And I do want to back you
Thank
up
you.
again and say you are a math person. You do have what it takes. And I understand what it's like when you're like, oh, I don't get math easy. But it's not about getting math easy. It's about having the work ethic and the grit and the patience to figure out what the teacher or what the textbook is trying to teach you, right? So that you go from, that struggle at the beginning, that productive struggle, to actually conceptually understanding the topic, and then being able to go
Absolutely.
work through your anxieties through grit, and to continue to move forward. And you did it.
I'll tell you, it was not easy. This past school year has never been easy because, um, if I'm going to be very open up about it, it was I wouldn't say the word catastrophic. I would say it was a very eventful school year, starting in August and, working my way up, because I was diagnosed with depression 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. And so
Oh wow.
it was,
You give so much joy to people. You give so much joy to people. I'm happy that
and
you're in our circle.
what goes on behind closed doors. I remember being, incredibly lonely, and, I was like, and I remember telling a friend of mine, I said, if I can be an advocate, then what in the world can I do to change this? And she goes, well, I would recommend that you get a support team, get a psychiatrist, get a therapist. I said, okay, I can do this. So what I did was made a phone call to a behavioral health center, was able to get a therapist and psychiatrist appointment within the same week. So I was able to not just talk about my feelings directly, but having to open up about not just who I'm experiencing as a whole, but also to understand that, life is no picnic. It's something that people sometimes do take for granted. And so I remember using grit and using not just my depression. I was like, okay, I got to do this because people are, pushing me. I wouldn't say pushing me, but they're motivating me to become successful. And, I echo what you said in regards to me becoming a politician. I would first start out as an educator because that's my calling. I've always wanted to become an elementary reading and writing coach. So my plan is because I'm having to go back again this year to finish up what I started last year.
Okay.
My goal is using grit, working my tail off, and getting that diploma. And I tell you what, it's going to be. And when you said avenue, the first thing I thought of was, is she referring to the electric avenue? Because, I love the different pathways that I want to do. I mean, I've always, destined myself as a politician. And when I did an ancestry DNA search, come to find out that, not just my 9 times great grandfather was a signer of the Declaration, but also a senator and then governor. And then I have a cousin up in North Carolina who's a county commissioner and is now running for U.S. Senate. So I really have the motivation.
Yes, you do.
I'm a politician.
Yes, you do.
And
you're very pretty.
And so if that means that I have to Tallahassee and let the bad guys, then I'm willing to do it. I mean, I'm only 18 years old. I mean, at 18, if I had my diploma, I would probably be in the supervisor elections office filing my papers for school board right now.
Go for it.
But,
And the thing is, never let anyone make you feel that, never let anyone, Alexander, make you feel that you're too young to accomplish something, because you might be a record breaker. You might be a trendsetter. We need pioneers and trendsetters, even in Gen Z. So, just count yourself as one that you're leading, you're carrying the torch for your generation. So, and just know that you've got people like myself that back you 100%. We'll be here to support you. And so more about the grit, because this is really fascinating to me. Because how were you able to apply the great resilience in time when you were going through that rut? What was it that did it for you, that said, okay, I've got to change my mindset? What happened?
Well, I remember sitting down with my high school counselor, and I remember seeing all these seniors, ordering their cap and gowns, class rings, ordering tickets to prom, homecoming. And it really was like, I really got to get in the right frame of mind, because if they can, do extracurricular activities like prom, like homecoming, going to football games, then I really have to work my tail off in order to get that. Because in the same token, my counselor has always been my biggest motivation, always has. When I was struggling with issues in a classroom, She was like, okay, we need to do something. And I was very fortunate enough to work with her for 2 years. And then she announced that she was leaving to go work for the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So she got a higher position. And I remember her last day, and I remember telling her, I'm like, my greatest, biggest motivation is not there. She goes, just because I'm not here physically at the school site, I'm always with you spiritually.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Meaning that if I'm far away in Wisconsin, or if I'm, she doesn't live in Wisconsin, but it's a remote position. But she was like, I'm always here for you. I got your back. She goes, you have so much potential. She goes, your mom. She goes, you have this whole team that's around you, and they're backing you, and they have your back. You just got to apply it and do the work. And if you do the work, then you'll be able to get rewarded. She goes, trust me, it works. And so, although I am struggling really badly with math, I can't even tell you, basic algebra. And I literally have to use Khan Academy and using what resources I have that are district based, because as you know, Hillsborough County Public Schools no longer has paper, which was a free tutoring platform for our students, because they said that it was quote unquote too expensive. So as a matter of fact, I looked into a resource and was able to find out that the University of Florida has a library that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening, starting at 5 o'clock up until 8, they do free tutoring services for local high school students. So they offer, free tutoring. There's no pay. And I said, do I really? And I went to one of the meetings. They're either hybrid, meaning they have a combination of Zoom or Teams with in person. So you're not just, sitting there in the limelight. But I think that having great motivation and having that motivation and grasping it, and I like to call it the bull by the horns, because if you're grasping grit, it's like, like a cliff climber. You can't get to the top of the mountain until you pull yourself up and try.
Wow.
So
say that again.
It's important that we use that.
Wow. So you said you're taking grit, you're grasping grit, and it's like taking the bull by the horns. And so you were able to really implement gritty practices as a student when you weren't motivated, or when you were maybe a little bit afraid. And when did it really kick in? When were you got it?
I honestly felt like I didn't have. When did it really kick in?
Yeah.
The week before I took CLT, my cousin, who's a math coach up in Osceola County, told me, she was like, okay, Alex, what is your goal plan? And I told her, I was like, my plan is to attend UCF, University of Central Florida, and earn my bachelor's in elementary education, and then, teach in Orlando. And she goes, well, in order to do that, how do you think you're going to get there? I said, well, I'm going to get there by motivating myself. She goes, I do one better. She goes, I'm going to give you a copy of the CLT handbook, which is a practice test. See how well you do. I took the practice test. I didn't get that quite far. And then I just kept on practicing. I was like, okay, I got this. And there would be times where I would study as late as 11:30 at night and get up as early as 5 o'clock in the morning and do it again. And I did it until eventually the 2 days before, okay, it's a Sunday, and I'm on my computer, which is what I'm using now for this interview. And I remember searching. I was like, okay, what are some tips that I can use? One of them was taking your time on an exam. CLT, and it was the Sunday before. And I remember telling my sister, I said, okay, go grab the study guide. We're going to sit down at the table and we're going to study it together. And at this point, my sister has been out of school for almost a year. So she still has a little bit of retention of knowledge from, geometry, algebra, stuff like that. And so I told her, I was like, I would just remember being 2.5 hours into studying. And I just remember putting my pen down. I was like, I can't do it. She goes, don't stop. She goes, if you stop, And that's going to show that I wouldn't say that you're tired. It's just showing that you're not motivated. I said, what do you think I should do? She goes, go on YouTube. She goes, look for, she goes, type in motivational speeches. Well, there was this one speech where it talked about a NBA player who got injured on the court and had to sit out for a year so he can, focus on his health. And I used that. As a matter of fact, there was a movie that was recommended to me by a good friend of mine. She was like, I don't know if you've ever seen Flashdance. And in the end, where she goes into audition and she falls on the ground and she gets back up and she tries again. I use that as motivation to be like, okay, if I'm on the ground, I can pull myself up and I can ace that test tomorrow.
That's right.
And so at 5 o'clock the next morning, sure as crap, it was Monday. And so I was like, okay, I got this. I'm going to play the Bengals, which was it. And it was a crazy manic Monday for sure because traffic was backed up on I-75.
Oh, yeah.
So here I am sitting in my mom's car, and we're just talking, and I have my little Stanley, and I'm sitting there sipping water, going over. And what I did before I sat down for the exam was we were allowed to practice and take the practice test, which was completely virtual. And I used basic retention of knowledge from what I remembered for the last 2 weeks, or basically the entire month. And basically 4 months of hardcore practicing, I was like, okay, I can do this. I got this. Now let's see how well I can do. And I remember it was 2 weeks later, and it was a Tuesday morning. And every Tuesday morning from 7 to 8, I attend Bible study with my church, which is completely virtual through Zoom. And I remember telling my pastor, I said, I'm going to need lots of prayers because today is the day that I found out that I'm going to find out if I passed or if I didn't pass my CLT. I believe strongly that by my faith in God and that through having grit and, having different people motivating me and, not just using my religion, but also using resources around me actually helped me pass my math benchmark. And I remember crying. I remember telling the master coach, I was like, I did it. She goes, yeah. I said, so what's next? She goes, you're reading. I said, oh, gosh. I said, okay, I can do it. So
you can do it. That's right.
So October or September, I will be taking the FSA.
Excellent.
Hopefully.
And you're going to do very well. And so continue to take grit with you. And, you're going to update us with some great reports. I know it. You have a whole time now. Are you a senior now or junior? What are you?
Yes. So I'm going back because of credit reasons, but I am a senior this year. So
Excellent.
Hopefully I can say hats off or laissez-faire, which in French means hands off. I know it talks about, social capitalism, but besides the point, I think that this year, I said it before, and I'm really mean it this time. I wasn't ready then, but I'm definitely ready now to, pull the bull by the horns and be like, okay, I can do it. I got this.
You got it.
And by having that weekly motivation, sermons and things like that, I can use that to pass and carry it with me for the rest of my life.
Exactly. And we're proud of you, and we're going to be here waiting to cheer you on, and we'll be here if you need us. So and then of course, as you're looking into college and stuff, reach out to us to see that we can get you squared away for if you need to apply to colleges, scholarships, and things like that. Let's work together this year. I really have a soft spot for seniors. All you seniors out there that might need that support, reach out. I would love to assist however possible. So with that said, Alexander, do you have any last minute advice for whether it's leaders, parents, students on, just grit or anything that you're wanting for the upcoming school year or just anything in general?
Well, my goals for the upcoming 24-25 school year is obviously to graduate. That's always been a biggest A plus is overall graduating. But secondly, to my student population, do not think that you're alone. If you are seeing this, you are not alone. I have your back. I will always have your back. As for my parents and for my teachers, I understand that the stresses of school can be tough for your student, but the best way to say that a student is trying is by motivating them. Don't tell them to quit. Do not tell them to be like, you can't do it. You have the courage within you to do it. Lastly, I would like to make a special shout out to a few of my good friends who actually helped me along the way. Gwendolyn, Chelsea, DJ, and Aiden. I cannot thank you enough for the amazing support that you've actually given me over the last 4 years. It may have been tough, but just know that I have always have your back in whatever decisions you make. Especially my friend David, who is actually on his way to basic training this week. David, you got this, man. What can I say? You're like a little brother. Keep up the amazing work. So with that being said, I turn it back to you.
Thank you. That's so sweet of you. It's beautiful that you've acknowledged your tribe and you have accepted your
Yeah, I
tribe.
forgot Dr. White. Thank you again, Dr. White.
You know I'm here for you, period. So that's not going to change.
That.
So yeah, so we're all in this together. We're cheering you on. So we'll definitely have you back on the show. And so with that said, guys, thanks so much for joining me today on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. Again, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on X Factor EDU Network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph. Check those Spotify podcasts out when you get a chance. This also will be featured on Spotify. Check out my website, www.india-white.com for books, blogs, and to schedule me for a speaking event or to, to give me some insight, to leave a testimonial. I'm down for that too. Also, my social media handles, which I will eventually get cleaned up. I've been busy traveling and preparing presentations, so forgive me. But right now, here it is. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is India238. YouTube is India White123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. I am looking forward to seeing many of you guys at these conferences listed below. Camped, see you guys there. Thank you, Camped Conference staff, amazing people. Paula, all of y'all are amazing. Thank you. NCSM, I'll be there. NCTM, ICTM, OCTM, ATMNE, and beyond. I'll also be visiting in California for a keynote there coming up next month, and also some other school districts. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys throughout the nation. Thank you for your love and your support. And thank you, Alexander, for being a part of the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. How can we reach you?
Oh, well, okay. So for my I have an office phone number. My office is open during the summer, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. So my phone number for my Google Voice is 813-578-7632. You can reach me on Twitter at real Alex B. Rivera. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn at www.linkedin.com/in/AB Rivera12. Instagram is Alexander B. Rivera. Feel free to reach out if you're in need of motivation. I'm always looking to being a part of public speaking events, so I can share my journey as an advocate. So if you are interested in either or, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, I am a student, so please be cautionary of my hours and my time. If I do not answer right away, it is because I'm busy at work or I have other stuff that I have to get done. Also, if you are in need of, let's say, if you need somebody to talk to, my email is always available. It is Alexander, ALEXANDER, B as in boy, Rivera16@hotmail.com. Just know that I am here for you, so please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions, comments, or concerns that you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Alexander. And so I appreciate you guys understanding that he is still a student. So we will keep everything, all of the contacts and communication above board, and we will talk to him solely about education. So again, thanks so much for reaching out to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. Thanks for joining us today. And until next time, stay gritty. See you guys.